Shortness of breath while jogging at Camp David. He is reportedly in stable condition, but is said to be requiring further examination. The White House describes the ailment as an atrial fibrillation, which they define as a rapid, uncoordinated contraction of the heart chamber. We have joining us on the phone now from Boston, our ABC medical editor, Dr. Tim Johnson. Tim, what is an atrial fibrillation? Is that a serious condition?
It can be under some circumstances, but it is usually not a serious condition in and of itself. And I must stress that the so-called chaotic contractions you describe are only in the upper chambers of the heart. It therefore is far less serious than the kind of fibrillation that can occur in the two lower chambers of the heart, the ventricular chambers. Usually when you have so-called atrial fibrillation, it does affect the pumping of the heart to some degree, and that's why there may be shortness of breath. But it does not represent a major problem in the major pumping chambers of the heart, the lower chambers. So you try to correct this rhythm problem in the upper chambers, and that in turn should solve the problem of the heart's pumping action.
Of course, what we're most concerned about is whether this could be a life-threatening condition. I take it from what you've said that it probably is not. It can be repaired.
Right. Ventricular fibrillation can be life-threatening. This is the kind of thing that happens in a cardiac arrest. But atrial fibrillation, confined to the two upper chambers, is usually not life-threatening. It usually can be treated very effectively and very quickly. Sometimes it comes on very suddenly, as apparently in this case, and goes away also very suddenly. At other times, it can become a more chronic condition, in which case it may require some longer-term treatment. But obviously, we'll have to await more details to find out if this was simply an isolated, acute episode, or whether it does represent some kind of more chronic problem.
Now, I know you don't have the details of the case, but what is likely happening at Bethesda? What kinds of examinations would he be undergoing right now?
Well, obviously, as with any medical condition, the big issue is to find the underlying cause or causes, if possible. Very often that will never happen, and in this case he would be treated sometimes initially with some maneuvers in which by pressing on, for example, certain structures in the neck, we can restore normal heart rhythm, or he may require medication, or under some circumstances for this kind of a problem they may require some electrical treatment to the heart to restore a normal heart rhythm. Obviously I have no idea what's going on at this moment.
Thank you for giving us the benefit of your knowledge so far, Dr. Tim Johnson. And we're going to bring you more details if they become available during the newscast, and I'll be back with more news in a moment.
The same medicine
House right now. Kyle, what can you tell us?
Carol, the White House remains very quiet as I speak to you. No one has come to the press office here yet at the White House. As you know, this happened at Camp David. There has been a statement that says the president suffered a shortage of breath at approximately 4:20 p.m. while jogging at Camp David. That would have happened, Carol, after we returned from Ann Arbor, where, as you know, the president addressed the commencement ceremonies at the University of Michigan.
This is a surprise, isn't it? The president has jogged for many, many years, and he's been in excellent health, hasn't he?
Yes, he has, Carol. I might add that it was just a few weeks ago that the president had a physical and came through with flying colors as usual. He jogs, he played racquetball on Thursday up on the Hill. We see him pursuing physical activity all the time.
Thank you very much, Kyle Gibson. We want to tell you that the president's condition was described as an atrial fibrillation, which is described as a rapid, uncoordinated contraction of the upper heart chamber. And we have on the phone from Boston, ABC medical editor, Dr. Tim Johnson. Dr. Tim, you told us earlier this is not life-threatening.
In the vast majority of cases, it is not. In fact, there are people who suffer with this condition without even knowing it. It's only when it gives rise to some kind of symptoms, such as shortness of breath, that they would bother to get it checked out in those cases.
Is this something that could be treated with medication rather than surgery?
Oh, absolutely. It would be extremely rare, almost unheard of, to treat this condition with surgery unless there were some other underlying heart condition that was causing this. In and of itself, this kind of a problem is very typically treated either with medication or, as I said earlier, with some kind of an electrical treatment to the heart that usually restores it to normal rhythm. Surgery is almost always unnecessary.
Dr. Tim, is this a condition that's fairly common in a man Mr. Bush's age? He's 66 years old, but always been in good health. Is this something that could happen?
It's something that could happen at any age, and in fact, this kind of heart rhythm problem very often occurs in younger people for all kinds of different reasons. Too much stress, too much caffeine, maybe, for example, in some cases. So it is a common heart rhythm problem. It can occur at any age and at almost any time.
So the fact that he was jogging is not necessarily what may have caused it.
May or may not be coincidental.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Tim Johnson. We're going to continue to keep you informed about the president's condition throughout the evening with special reports as events warrant. That's World News Saturday. Watch Jack Smith later on the Weekend Report. I'm Carol Simpson. Good night. At Camp David. He is reported to be in safe and stable condition, but the White House says the president must remain at Bethesda Naval Hospital for further observation. Mr. Bush was rushed to the hospital by helicopter after one of his personal physicians determined that he had suffered an atrial fibrillation, which is described as a rapid, uncoordinated contraction of the upper heart chamber. It is not normally life-threatening. The president is 66 years old, and he's an avid sportsman who normally jogs several times a week, 2 to 3 miles. His last physical examination was on March 27th, and his personal physician, Dr. Burton Lee, pronounced him in excellent health. Dr. Lee said there were no surprises at the physical exam, and he said Mr. Bush remains an extraordinarily vigorous man who continues to thrive on a great deal of physical activity and a demanding work schedule. Standing by at the White House now is ABC White House correspondent Kyle Gibson. Kyle, what's going on at the White House now?
Well, Carol, I can tell you that not long ago, the White House spokesman, Marin Fitzwater, arrived and gave reporters a thumbs-up sign. He hasn't said anything else, but he has released the following statement. It says that Mr. Bush suffered the shortage of breath at approximately 4:20 p.m. while jogging at Camp David, and that Dr. Michael Nash of the Camp David Medical Facility then examined the president and determined he had the atrial fibrillation that you mentioned. The president was then helicoptered to Bethesda Naval, and he is reported to be in stable condition. We don't have much here other than that for the moment, Carol, but we were with the president earlier today. I was, when he addressed the commencement ceremonies in Michigan. He looked vigorous. He attacked the old social policies of Lyndon Johnson, and he went after the new vogue political correctness. There was no sign at that time that he wasn't feeling well, at least by the nature of his speech. He was booed a few times, I might add, and was unfazed, incorporated those boos right into a few comments about political speech, and then free speech, and he got a few cheers. He has gone jogging recently. He went and played racquetball on Thursday night up on Capitol Hill. He is a very active man, as we see him every day here at the White House.
Kyle, we understand that this is not a life-threatening condition, but where is the vice president, and has he been notified?
Yes, Carol, we understand the vice president received the news while he was hosting a reception at the vice presidential residence here in Washington. He is apparently hosting the National Space Society, and it appears he will continue the reception, and in fact his spokesman has said that the vice president will maintain his routine for now.
Okay, Kyle Gibson, thank you very much. Standing by on the telephone in our Boston bureau is ABC's medical editor, Dr. Tim Johnson. Tim, the president is said to have suffered this atrial fibrillation. Can you, in layman's terms, tell us exactly what that is?
That means, Carol, that the two upper chambers of the heart are beating in irregular fashion.
Good evening. This is Carol Simpson in Washington. President Bush is at Bethesda Naval Hospital tonight, where he is reported in stable condition after suffering shortness of breath while jogging at Camp David this afternoon. In just a few moments, presidential spokesman Marin Fitzwater will be holding a briefing for reporters at the White House. Before that briefing begins, here's what we know so far. After the president experienced shortness of breath, one of his personal physicians determined that he'd suffered an atrial fibrillation, a rapid, uncoordinated contraction of the upper heart chamber. We understand this is not normally a life-threatening situation. Standing by at the White House is ABC's Ann Compton. Ann, what else can you add?
We can add that from two indications, it would seem the president's in pretty good shape. One, that people saw him walk from his helicopter into the hospital building. That was after the incident about 3 hours, almost 4 hours ago. And the second incident when the phone at the vice president's residence rang at about 7:20, and Vice President Quayle took a call from the president, who was, we are told, relatively upbeat and even in something of a joking mood. They are not taking, here at the White House, they don't take anything medical about the president without great seriousness and great concern. They don't take anything for granted, but they are also not panicking over this either.
And the president had a physical on March 27th and was pronounced in excellent health. Is this a surprise?
Here's Marin Fitzwater, Carol.
Okay.
President Bush is relaxed, comfortable, and having dinner with Mrs. Bush in his room at Bethesda Naval Hospital this evening. He is in good spirits, and the doctor's reports are very positive. President Bush developed atrial fibrillation, which is an irregularity of the heartbeat, while running at Camp David this afternoon about 4:20 p.m. This condition presented itself as unusual fatigue during the run. The president was evaluated by Dr. Michael Nash at Camp David, who detected the irregular heartbeat and found him to be entirely stable with no other symptoms. The president, accompanied by Mrs. Bush and Dr. Nash, flew by helicopter to Bethesda Naval Hospital, arriving about 5:58 p.m. this evening. At the time of hospital admission, the irregular heartbeat was still present, but the president was completely alert and entirely stable with no complaints. The president walked into the hospital on his own power. An electrocardiogram showed no abnormalities except the irregular heart rhythm. An ultrasound examination of the heart showed no structural abnormalities and normal heart function. The president is undergoing treatment for atrial fibrillation with the drug digoxin. Diagnostic testing and initial treatment took approximately 1 hour. The president has been consulting with Governor Sununu on various issues at the hospital. The president will remain there for observation over the night. Physicians in attendance are Dr. Lawrence Moore, Colonel of the U.S. Army, Dr. Michael Nash, Major U.S. Air Force of the White House Medical Unit, and Dr. John A. Williams III, Lieutenant Commander, U.S. Navy, a staff cardiologist at Bethesda Naval Hospital. Mrs. Bush will remain with the president at the hospital overnight. Vice President Quayle spoke with the president by telephone about 7:20 p.m. and found him in excellent spirits. I'll try to answer any questions that you have. Frank?
Marlin, how long was he running when this happened? Did he fall, or was there any outward sign?
He had been running for several minutes. I don't have the exact time. He simply complained of fatigue and mentioned to his Secret Service agents that he thought he should check it out. They walked at that point over to the camp infirmary where they met Dr. Nash, and he conducted the initial examination. Tom?
Did he have any other problems like chest pain, dizziness?
He didn't complain of anything other than just fatigue, a little shortness of breath, but that seemed to be the nature of the complaints at the time. Does the
irregular heart rhythm continue even now?
I can't say that it does at this point. The doctors reported that it did at the time of the of admission, but I don't know whether it does right now. Helen?
Has a heart attack definitely been ruled out, and will he be undergoing more tests? And could his stay in the hospital be prolonged, and is he canceling any this week's?
There are no indications at this time that he had a heart attack. The president will remain overnight for observation. There are some tests that were taken during the examination that we won't have the results of until tomorrow, and so we'll make a report to you on those at that time. Whether or not the president will return to Camp David or the White House tomorrow, or exactly when, is still a question to be settled tomorrow. The president and Mrs. Bush would like to go back to Camp David, but we're not sure what their plans will be. We will let you know that tomorrow. John?
Well, did the president have any advance warning when feeling ill early today? He looked terrific in Michigan.
There was no advance warning and no prior indications. As you know, the president had a physical examination in March. The doctors prescribed him in excellent health, and there was no indication of this problem at that time. Pat?
Can you tell us what the president had to say to people? Was he alarmed, anxious?
No, the president was in very good spirits. As I said, he walked to the infirmary, was checked out. He was making jokes with the staff about trying to get back to jogging and hadn't finished his game and so forth. He walked to the helicopter and came down to Bethesda Naval in quite good spirits, did some routine paperwork. Before he left, he asked that his briefcase be put on the helicopter so he'd have some work to do. And so he's in good spirits and is ready to get back in the game.
Doctors often say that anxiety is the real problem for people who suffer this ailment. Would you say the president is not anxious?
The president is calm, cool, and collected and never been anxious in his life. Well, maybe once, but I can't remember it. Michael?
Along those lines, though, another factor, a contributing factor can be fatigue. We understand that the president's been under a lot of stress lately. Has that been ruled out as a cause, or might he be asked to take it easy for a while?
They don't expect to prescribe any restraints for his physical activity, assuming that this diagnosis holds up. He could be back jogging in a matter of days. And as I said, the president has conducted himself in extremely rigorous fashion in terms of all of his competitive sports activities, and this problem has not produced any problem before. I would say that he has not canceled any of his plans next week, intends to conduct a full schedule on Monday, and we don't see any change in his physical routine either. Ann?
Was there anybody else jogging with him at the time, or was it just agents? And also, do you have any idea whether he had gone for 2 minutes or 15 minutes?
It was just Secret Service agents, but I don't know the exact amount of time he was running. Wendell?
Alan, what did the president talk with Vice President Quayle about?
The Vice President just called, obviously, to see how he was getting along, how the tests were coming, his general spirits. It was just a pleasantries conversation.
Who called?
Vice President called the president.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Marlin, actually, speaking of Quayle, have any precautionary steps been taken to prepare him to resume?
Well, Governor Sununu called the Vice President and General Scowcroft this afternoon before the President left Camp David, just to tell them. But there were no special precautions that were taken. This was never considered to be that serious. There's never been any question of the president losing consciousness or not being able to carry out his functions. He's been, as I mentioned, walking around, alert, active through all of this. So there's never been any contemplation that I'm aware of having to implement any broader kinds of notification. Helen?
What do they think is the reason that came on him, if you don't say this, no stress and overdoing it in exercise? And what was the reason?
Well, there really isn't any way to tell. This is one of those things where if you look it up in the medical dictionary, as I did backstage, it says that this often happens to people. It's relatively common. It's produced by fatigue, but beyond that, it's pretty hard to say. Yes, ma'am.
Marlin, can you tell us a little bit more about this drug that the president will be taking and exactly what it is meant to do?
It's digoxin. It's spelled D-I-G-O-X-I-N, and it doesn't have any side effects from the standpoint of any physical changes. It's designed to restore the rhythm or restore the heart to a normal rhythm.
Taking this, or will he be taking?
He is taking this medicine. He'll continue to take it for probably several weeks, perhaps a month or so, and at that time they'll reevaluate it and see if it should be continued or what should be done. Ellen?
It's been now something like 4 hours, Marlin, since this incident occurred. Can you tell us whether his heartbeat is now normal? And can you describe for us the tests he has undergone and the tests he is undergoing?
Well, he's taking this medication to ensure its normalcy, but I don't have anything more specific.
Can you tell us the tests he underwent at Camp David, those that he underwent at the hospital, and when we can expect to hear those results?
I don't have a list of specific tests. I'll ask the doctors about that tomorrow. Patrick?
You say that the president will be back jogging within a week. Are you kidding about that? I mean,
that's what the doctor said, is that he could be engaged in physical activity very soon, in a matter of days.
You hear about joggers, supposedly healthy people, falling over of heart attacks every day. I mean, would the president seriously contemplate going back to jogging?
I was simply trying to point out that this is not the kind of thing that limits physical activity for any period of time.
Marlin,
And
you've treated this all very coolly and calmly with no sense of panic, but whenever there's a question about the president's health, especially one where he says he needs some kind of, there is a certain amount of concern. Are you saying that there is not a great deal of concern about the president's, either this episode or his health in the hours to come?
the medical diagnosis and treatment to this point indicates a routine handling of this. The statement, I think, is very clear on that point, that this is a problem that is treatable with medication. The president's in good spirits, and we don't have any undue alarm.
You didn't scare him or any of you?
The president just called in to say that he was running or walking for about 35 to 40 minutes. Now, this doesn't mean you can all ask questions of the president and he'll call up and give you an answer. Dinner this evening consisted of steak, salad, mixed vegetables, and skim milk.
Is he watching this on television, Marlin?
Yes, he is.
Are you sure that's wise?
He thinks you've done a great job so far, Pat. Frank.
Marlin, can you say
Let's just take 2 or 3 more questions and we'll wrap it up.
Can you tell us whether, A, there have been any prior episodes where he might have felt overly fatigued but not felt so much so that he needed medical care, and whether there are any underlying major conditions that have to be ruled out that could have caused this?
No indication of past complaints or concerns similar to this situation.
How about the idea that any functional situations could bring on this atrial fibrillation that have to be ruled out? These tests must be looking for something.
No activities, physical or of any other kind, that would have to be ruled out, at least on the basis of the existing test. Jim?
Is he hooked up to any kind of monitors now?
Well, he's being observed. I don't know kind of what that means, frankly. I'll have to ask the doctors.
Right.
Frank, last question.
And, can you say whether, when you say this situation can be treated with medication, does that mean that President Bush will have to be on medication more or less permanently as a result of this? And can you say what will determine whether, in fact, he will be released tomorrow?
We can't say permanently, as I said, on the digoxin. It will be for a period of time, and then they'll have to reevaluate it. But it is something that's treated medically and does not have any side effects or any long-term problems should that be necessary. Many people are on this kind of treatment for long periods. Thank you very much.
When will you hit me next?